In this video, I'm going to show you how I did my first fix and flip deal when I entered the real estate investing world about 10 years ago. We're going to cover 5 important topics, starting with number 1, how and where I found the deal. Number 2, how I funded the deal. Number 3, the kind of renovations that I did on the property. Number 4, how much money was spent on the property. And number 5, probably most importantly, how I got the work done. And bonus in there, number 6, we'll talk about how much profit the property made at the end. By the way, if you stick around to the end, I'm going to share a couple of golden nuggets that I wished I knew along the way that really would have helped when I was first getting started. If you're new here, make sure to hit the subscribe button and let's get right into it. So number 1, how and where I found this deal in the first place. So this would be an incomplete video or topic if I didn't at least share a little bit of my background, my backstory, and how I first came to be interested in real estate investing. So I'll give you the short, sweet version. I was 21 years old. I had my first daughter when I was really young, and that led to me being interested in finding out how I can improve myself. How can I be better? How can I make more money? How can I provide more financial security for my family? How can I leave a legacy behind? And all of that led me to reading the book by Robert Kiyosaki, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, which is funny because a lot of real estate investors that I talk to still to this day say that that was kind of the gateway drug for them into real estate investing. So I'm curious, drop in the comments if that was your segue into real estate or if there was something else that kind of led to this journey for you. So anyway, I read that book and I made up my mind that I'm going to be a real estate investor. This is what I'm going to do. And that probably led to another Google search at the time, which probably brought me to sites like biggerpockets.com. And that stuff is all great. It's wonderful. Forums are awesome. Any way that you can connect with other like-minded people and share thoughts, share successes and failures is a wonderful thing. But for me, I knew that I wanted to do something in person. So I found a local RIA, Real Estate Investor Association is what that stands for. And there's probably a group in almost every major county in the country. So you can just do a Google search for local REIA and you'll probably find something in your area. But anyway, I started going to the meetups at my RIA and I started making some relationships. I started making some connections. I made friends with some guys that had been fix and flippers for decades. I made friends with landlords that had owned hundreds of properties. And I don't want to breeze over that because truth be told, that's one of the most important things that you can do in not just in this business, but in life in general is cultivate relationships with people that you want to model what they have done, right? There's nothing better than shortcutting success. You don't have to make all the mistakes and failures and learn everything on your own entirely when you can leverage the experiences of other people, right? So anyway, I was going to these meetups for a couple of months, and there I met a guy that I ended up ultimately hiring as a mentor for $5,000, which by the way, I did not have $5,000. I was young, I was a new father, and really I didn't have too much money at all, but somehow I saved up enough money to hire this guy as a mentor to kind of guide me and make sure that I wasn't making any massive mistakes. So now I was off to the races and I had this vision, this game plan that I was going to replace all of my W-2 income with cash flow from rental properties that I would buy, renovate, and put tenants in place over the years. I told this business plan to my mentor and he was setting me up for success and making sure that I wasn't going to make any stupid mistakes along the way. But when it came to searching and sourcing for that first deal that I was going to do as my first rental property, I was spending hours every day for months on end trying to find a property that was going to fit the model of what I wanted to do. And in the county that I lived in at the time and where I invest heavily, it's really hard to cash flow with single family homes because the property taxes are so high in comparison to the amount of rental income that you can charge. So that was making it challenging to find a deal at the time. But after spending, again, hours every day for weeks or months trying to find a deal, I did eventually find something that didn't make sense as a rental, but it made sense as a flip. And it was a bank-owned property. It was a foreclosure. And I forget exactly what it was listed for, but I know that I ended up purchasing it for $45,000, which, sidebar, if that is you right now and you're searching for properties hours on end, week in, week out, now here we are a decade later, and as a remediation to some of these pain points that I also felt just like you years ago, me and my team have developed a AI software that leverages technology to sift through and sort through all properties on the MLS to help you find your next flip, your next rental. You can even find deals to wholesale on there by leveraging AI. You can check that out at revamp365.ai. That's not the point of this video, but if you're struggling with that, check that out. It'll definitely help you find your next deal. So anyway, I found this property and decided this is the one. I'm gonna do a fix and flip on this, and it's gonna be awesome. Which brings us to number 2 and the problem. How am I gonna fund this deal? I did not have the money. I did not have $45,000. I definitely didn't have the $45,000 that I was planning to put into the property. So now we're at $90,000. I didn't have this money, so what was I gonna do? Well, you gotta raise the money. You can do things like find a private lender, you can find a hard money lender, you can find a bank if you have good W-2 income and look good on paper. And at the end of the day, that's what I ended up doing on this property specifically. So this goes back to the importance of, number 1, of networking and building relationships with people, because ultimately the bank that ended up funding this project for me was through a relationship that my mentor connected me with. So I kind of forgot about this until I was going through some of my documents here. But when I first put this property under contract, I did not have a lender in place. I did not have the money myself. I did not have a lender in place. I really didn't know how I was going to fund the project, but I did know that I was going to do whatever I had to make it work. So I put this property under contract without having the money, which is not necessarily a good thing unless you have, like me, a PhD, which in this case does not mean a doctorate. It means pig-headed determination and the grit and will to do whatever it takes to get something done. So with that, had the property under contract, no idea how I was going to fund it. So literally what I did was I put together this here that, again, I kind of forgot about this entirely until now. I put together this packet that I sent to every lender that I could. And I kind of viewed this as like my business plan, if you will. So I had my purchase price 45. We intended to spend 45 on renovation. I had our ARV in here at 165,000. So check this out. I put in here just some facts and details about the property. Apparently pulled some city data about the town that this was located in. Attached some comps to it here. So by the way, this is a valuable thing that you can do on any property that you're thinking about buying, because it's really easy to look at projects through rose-colored glasses because you want to buy a deal, you want it to be tomorrow, you want it to be a good project, you want it to be profitable. So it's easy to kind of mentally lie to yourself and make a property seem better than it really is. But when you're looking at it through the lens of hard facts and data and comps, it makes it a lot harder to give an inaccurate evaluation of what the property is worth, what you should buy it for, and how much you should spend. So after I sent that email to like 20 different lenders in the area, I only got one reply. Came to find out later that the only reason that I got this reply from this VP of this bank in New Jersey, which this deal was in Pennsylvania, by the way, the only reason I got a reply was because my mentor made a connection to the VP for me and basically said, hey, I'm sending over this guy, Drew. He's a young kid, but I think he's worth taking the chance on. You guys should lend him the money. So I had the money lined up for the property. However, not all of it, right? So this lender, like many others in this space, they funded 80% of the purchase price and 100% of the rehab, but I still had to come up with that 20%, and I had to have, enough money for fees and closing costs and loan points and all the things like this when I purchased, which on this deal specifically amounted to about $23,000 that I thought that I would need out of pocket. I didn't have 23 grand either. So all that I did have was my primary residence that me and my girlfriend at the time, now my wife, lived at. So I pulled a home equity line of credit against that house for $30,000 and used that as my down payment and floating cost, if you will. So now I was off to the races. I had the deal, I had it funded, let's go. So let's talk about number 3, what kind of renovations we did on this property. Again, this is why digital file storage is so damn important, because I still have all of this 10 years later in a OneDrive folder on my computer, easy to access. So let's look through it here. So here's what the house looked like when we bought it. You can see it's got a newer roof on it anyway. The windows are okay. So this is in the dining room, not so beautiful. There's kind of some overspray all over the floors. It smelled like terrible. By the way, we ended up removing this wall entirely leading into the kitchen because it was a non-load bearing wall. From the side here, the windows were all pretty good. We did end up replacing some on the porch that you'll see. Same picture. It had radiators throughout the house. This was the kitchen, which is obviously far from beautiful. If we're talking about fix and flips, this is a unacceptable kitchen by all means. The back side of the house, nothing special. There was this shed that was kind of falling down. This is in the living room. Again, overspray kind of everywhere, and it is far from beautiful. All right, so this is probably one of the biggest changes. This bathroom was terrible. The layout, terrible. Just overall, everything about it sucked. Disgusting, terrible, terrible layout, everything about it. Anyway, you'll see what we did on that. This was the front porch. That's basically it. All right, so before I show you what we did, let's talk about the big ticket items and the things that I knew that we would have to do going into this project. So as always with any fix and flip, you know that you're always doing things like paint and flooring. Always, hands down, you just are. Other big ticket items, you always want to focus on your kitchens, you want to focus on your bathrooms, right? Those are what sell a house, is kitchens and bathrooms and just overall cleanliness, right? So we knew that we had to do those things, and kind of added some things along the way, which I still do to this day. I'm pretty bad at adding things in when we're in the middle of a project, but whatever. So let's look at some of the things that we did here. Again, going through this slideshow, you can see here from the front, we ended up doing some minor things to help with curb appeal. We did this little garden bed right here. This is actually new vinyl siding on this section of the porch right here because it was just kind of a little too messed up and we couldn't really salvage it. And if you do look, this is the same color as the rest of the house, but this is probably 10 years old and this is brand new. So it looks a little faded on the side or on the top and side of the house, but you really can't tell unless someone brings it to your attention. So I want to bring up some of the little things that we did on this project and that we like to do on a lot of renovations because they're low cost and the perception of value to a home buyer is massive in comparison, right? So again, like the little garden bed right there, we did this little retaining wall with the same stone from right here on the side of the driveway. And it really just helped the curb appeal a lot. And ultimately probably only cost a couple $100, maybe $1,000, including everything. And we did do a seal coat on the driveway, which again was probably a couple $100, but makes a massive difference because it looks just like a brand new driveway when you look at this. If I didn't tell you that wasn't a new driveway, especially from this photo, you would think it was a new driveway. So this front porch here, we did end up replacing these windows and this window right here, which I did end up sourcing, I think, these windows and the picture window here and this front door all from like, I don't remember if it was Facebook Marketplace at the time, but it was something like that. Maybe it was even Craigslist. but it was some sort of builder's surplus, and I paid like 30 cents on the dollar of what the stuff should have cost. Like, I still remember to this day that this window was $50, like ridiculous. So especially when you're first starting, it really helps to be thrifty with things like that, and wherever you can control your cost is a helpful thing to do. All right, so this isn't the best picture, but it's like a panoramic photo from right inside the front door. So some of the things that we did here that you can see, we did do this like tray ceiling with recessed lighting in the living room. Then this opening right here, it was only about 4 foot wide. So we put a header in here, opened it up. I think this opening ended up being, I don't know, that's probably between 6 and 7 feet. Let's call it 6.5 feet, which made a big difference to the overall feel and flow of the house. So just imagine you walk in the front door, rather than having a boxy little room and a wall into another room that's totally boxed off. We opened this up a little bit and removed this wall over here entirely. So here's from the dining room looking into the kitchen. Obviously that kitchen just totally changed the feel of the house overall. Kitchen, you can see right here, we hung this little TV on the wall as well, because I think we added an extra TV from something. And this was also one of those things that it just kind of helps the perception of a buyer when they're going through, they're touring 50 different homes, and they see something that they've never seen in any other house, hands down, bar none. It helps them with their decision-making process and pulling the trigger to buy your property over the other ones. So here's the bathroom. This was probably the biggest change or improvement that happened on this property overall. So I think there's some before and after photos in here too that'll kind of really illustrate for you what we did and what we changed. But it really came down to that layout in there just sucked, and there wasn't any working with it. We just had to start fresh, which did mean we had to do all new plumbing in the bathroom, which is a lot of work. It's kind of a pain in the ass, costs more money, but I think it made a massive impact in the feel of definitely the bathroom and kind of the property overall. This was one of the things that we added. I don't think this was a part of the original plan. We added this deck on the back, and really that came down to looking at some of the data, some of the comps. Some of the highest ones did have decks. We wanted to be comparable to the nicest, highest selling properties, so we ended up putting one on. So this is directly next to the kitchen. So it's hard to tell from photos where this is, but basically this was in the stairwell going down to the basement, and there was just some like dead space. It was a closet before, and given that there was only one other bathroom in the house, I figured since we were doing the plumbing above anyway, and all the plumbing was in this little stack right here, it just kind of made sense that we were here anyway. Let's add a powder room in here. And again, for value and perception of value, this made a massive difference in value. All right, so the basement, this is what I would have called a semi-finished basement. You can see we drywalled some of the walls. This photo doesn't show, but it's drywalled all the way around the rest of the way, except for this party wall, because this house is a twin right here. Also worth noting, this is something that we did a lot in houses with low ceiling heights in basements, is we did not drywall the ceiling. We left the joists exposed and we sprayed everything black. And what that does, which by the way, we have black ceilings in my office now. What that does, especially when you have a low ceiling height, is it kind of removes your focal point from where the wall meets the ceiling, and it just makes it feel like there is more space than there really is. So that can be really a helpful tip if you're trying to do a finished basement, but you don't really have the height for it. We're talking basements that are, 7 foot ceiling height or less. This can be a really helpful thing to do. All right, cool. So here we got some before and after photos. So obviously this isn't totally before. This was probably mid-project because we started ripping some of the stuff off. And after, massive difference. Before and after, you can see, like I was talking about, that this opening was much smaller. So we opened that up, added the tray ceiling with some recessed lighting, which again, all these things aren't really super expensive to do. There's some more labor involved. There's some more legwork involved. But as far as straight material cost, not that much more than than not doing them at all. Kitchen obviously made a massive difference. Basement was totally unfinished and now was semi-finished. So the bathroom, yeah, this was, again, the biggest change, the biggest difference. You can see that layout just sucked. Having the tub on the side and the toilet basically had no room at all. So this just had to go. We ended up ripping out the window and putting in this picture window up high, which did mean we had to do some siding work on the exterior. We got rid of this radiator entirely, which I forgot about, since there was no longer going to be a radiator in here with how we laid everything out. What we ended up doing was putting that electric radiant flooring system under the tile. Done that in a lot of bathrooms now. And if you've never stepped on warm tile that has a heating system in it, you're missing out. It's really a nice luxury. It doesn't cost a whole lot of money, by the way. So that's basically it as far as renovations go. So let's talk about number 4, how much money was spent on all of these renovations. So as you saw in some of the other documents that I opened earlier on, we intended to spend $45,000 on the purchase and $45,000 on the rehab. And again, thank God for digital file storage. We can go back and look at the bid, the proposal that we put together when we first bought this property, which again is kind of funny looking back. This was, what did this say? Yeah, this is 9 years ago. All right, so the total for everything, total budgeted, we really budgeted $35,000, let's say, and accounted for about $5,000 in contingency reserves. Something that you should always do on every project is account for a contingency. That's expecting the unexpected, so to speak. And we accounted for $5,000 in that. And then obviously that put us at $40,000. All the other docs that you saw said $45,000 in renovation, because I fluffed that up a little bit more, probably at the guidance of my mentor at the time. He didn't know that I would still be like this today and blow every budget that I ever touch on a renovation project. But he did have the insight and wisdom to tell me to always account for and expect the unexpected. So with that, that was where we ended up. And I think we ended up spending a little bit more than that $45,000 anyway. I think we were closer to that $48,000 range. However, that probably is including some other things that aren't directly correlated to renovation. There's a lot of things that end up popping up that, depending on how you do your accounting or how you want to do your tracking, it's do I add the insurance that I'm paying for my builder's risk to my renovation, or is that its own category entirely? I'll talk about that in itself in another video, totally unrelated to this, but that's basically where we ended up. So number 5, and again, probably one of the most important things that a lot of people struggle with is how to get the work done. So for me, I kind of already had an ace in the hole a little bit, so to speak, going into this, because my game plan, my business plan, if you will, like I said, was really to handle the real estate side and build a rental portfolio. And my dad was a general contractor. So the vision was I handle the real estate side, dad handles the construction side. That's not how it ended up shaking out a couple years later, but that's another story entirely. But that's how I kind of got off the ground and running with this. So that still does not go to shortcut the relationships and the knowledge that I think that you should have to acquire to be able to do anything successfully long term. So for me, what that meant was, even though my dad was on site during the day working on this project, I was there every night, every weekend, grinding my butt off to not just get the project done, but to learn as much as I could as well. Some of the things that I did in this house specifically was I did do all the tile work. I helped build in the deck. I did some of the plumbing. I did all of the floors, which, by the way, ended up way too dark, but it was my first time. But a lot of people struggle with, how do I find contractors? How do I get work done? How do I not pay what a retail homeowner would for a kitchen, right? Like any of the kitchens that we do in most of our fix and flips would end up being a $50,000 retail kitchen, but we have to do this entire project for $50,000, right? So a lot of that does come to building relationships. But for me personally, I have always been of the mindset that I can't really successfully expect to hire something out that I don't have to be good at it. I don't have to be an expert at it, but I have to understand it. And the way that I understand things is by being hands-on and doing them, right? So I have learned at this point in my career, almost everything there is about construction, about building houses, going into material science and everything in between. And that has helped me over my career to be able to better hire and manage contractors. Still hasn't helped me with not blowing budgets, but that is besides the point. So at this point, you're probably wondering, how much profit did this project make at the end of the day? So let's put everything to totals here. All right, so let's see here. I still have this spreadsheet. This was a prelim analysis, which if you want access to any of these spreadsheets, because over the years, I still do use this, it has just evolved massively over the last decade. And if you want a copy of any of my analysis spreadsheets for fix and flips, buy and holds, just drop in the comments, let me know, and me or someone from my team will get these over to you entirely free. All right, so we were anticipating the flip to make around $39,000, $40,000, right? So let's just total some of this up here. Let's pull out a calculator. Let's do this old school. As good as my digital records are here, finding the P&L would be a little bit more legwork, and it's not entirely necessary. So let's just go through it brute force here. We purchased for $45,000. The rehab budget was $45,000, ended up closer to $48,000. So that put us at $93,000. And if we add in some of the other things like our closing cost, transfer taxes, loan points, origination, title fees, all this other stuff, that probably amounted to another, call it $4,000 or $5,000. Let's call it $5,000. We don't need exact science here. Then some other things along the way, like utilities, electric and gas while you're working on the project, water, insurance, which by the way, you need a builder's risk policy when you're doing anything like this. That probably added another $2,000 or $3,000. So for ease of math, let's just say that I was all into this property for $100,000. Okay, so let's pull up here. All right, so this is interesting, by the way, but I purchased in March for $45,000 and then did end up selling a couple months later for $165,000. So again, I said that the rehab was supposed to be 8 weeks. We ended up being about 10 weeks on the rehab. And then, of course, you always have whatever it is, 30, 45, 60 days that your buyer needs to get to settlement. So bought for 45, sold for 165. Okay. So if we're all into it for 100,000, you might be like, okay, cool. So he's into it for 100, sold for 165. He made 65. Not so fast. We have to take out things like commissions, transfer taxes again when we sell, and other transaction fees and all this other stuff, right? It's like fee in everything that you do. This is no exception. So if we back into that and we take out commissions, really at the end of the day, profit was closer to $52,000 on this property, okay? And one of the things that we do, by the way, that we always have done is to save a little bit of money on the listing side is we've always used a flat rate listing broker and pay $300, $500 or whatever, rather than the standard 3% to have somebody list the property for us. And mindset of that was obviously first and foremost to save a little bit of money. And number two, I wanted to be able to kind of control that part of the process, because this was a plan even from day one that we're not just doing this once, right? We're going to do this many, many, many times over and over and over again. And I want to be able to understand, again, going back to knowing how everything works, want to be able to understand and kind of control as much as possible with that process and save money. So on this deal alone, right, listing ourselves probably saved around $5,000. Maybe we paid $300 at the time for the flat rate listing. So save $4,700. It was a lot of money, right? It's significant. So yeah, making $52,000 on a deal, especially when it was our first fix and flip ever, that was more money than I was making in a year at the time. You know, like it was life-changing money. It really was a lot. And here's actually a picture of the check that I got at the settlement table when we sold the property. Now, you'll notice that it says $90,000, and I just said that really we profited $52,000, which is a key point, by the way, because you see a lot of real estate gurus and other people kind of flaunting their stuff on social media and Instagram and all this. But here's the reality. Most of the time when you get a check, which by the way, I don't get checks at all anymore. We do everything through wire transfer. But just because the check says $90,000 doesn't mean that you made $90,000. There's been deals that I've gotten a check for $100,000 and we actually lost money. I'll talk about those on another video entirely. But out of that $90,000, if you back out the $30,000 that I had out of my pocket into the deal and some other fees, other stuff, other costs, it put us around that $52,000 profit, like I said. So this property, this project, all things considered at the end of the day, ended up being profitable. It ended up being an awesome experience, awesome first project, awesome first property. And I do have to attribute a little bit of that to luck, even though I did as much as I could to self-educate. I went to the right places, talked with the right people, found a mentor, did all the right things, but I still can't take away from the fact that everything did seemingly go right on this project, on this property, which is not always the case. And I have many, many more stories than this, war stories, if you will, of projects and properties where everything went wrong. So you have to be aware of that. You have to be aware of the risk, but the upside and the life-changing aspect of kind of opening your mind to there's more out there. It really was life-changing for me. And this segued into me buying rental properties, me building a portfolio, me starting a wholesale company, scaling that wholesale company, starting a technology company, and all these other amazing things that I've done along the way all started from this deal. There's nothing stopping you. Go out in there and get it. If you haven't, like and subscribe. Comment below anything that you want to see in the future. Going to be dropping a lot of content new every week. See you on the next one.